Welcome to On the Bobble Podcast, episode 61. I'm your host, Sebastian J. Wade, and with me is my co-host, Yuki Lee Bender. And today we're going to be talking about how to draft warrior and heavy hitters. Unfortunately, I'm kind of sick right now, so maybe my voice might be a little bit more nasally, but unfortunately, nothing I can do about being sick. But how was your week, Yuki?
My week's been not bad. Played an RTN on the weekend. It was a CC RTN. I brought KO. I went 4-1 in Swiss and then lost in semis to Jay. There's actually a whole tournament write-up in our Patreon Discord that I posted. So if you're interested in the details, you can definitely read that. But overall, yeah, pretty happy with the KO list. It wasn't too different from what I played at the Battle Hardened. I was messing around with some extra blues, playing around with yellow wild rides. Deck's good. I still like the deck. I think I sideboarded wrong into J and then rolled a 1 and kind of got punished for it. But yeah, that's how it goes. Other than that, I've just been doing a lot of painting still. Actually, mostly done with that now. I have a few more days later on of painting to do, but starting to wind down and actually maybe have a little more time to play Fab instead of just painting all day. How have you been, Jay?
Yeah, that's great. Yeah, as you said earlier, I also played the RTN last Saturday, and I lost in the finals to Lucas. I asked to chop the gold foil in the last round, and Lucas just goes and tells me, "No, you won last week, so I'm not gonna chop with you, and I'm gonna try and win this gold foil." And then when we played the game out, I lost 48-1 or 48-0.
Yeah, I mean, Dromai into Dash is pretty good matchup. Um, so I don't blame him for not chopping. That's part of the reason I was hoping I'd beat you, because then I get to play Lucas in the finals, and I like the KO Dromai matchup, but you had to kill me and let Lucas win.
I actually don't think that matchup is that bad. It kind of just depends on how fast I can get the induction chambers up. Then I
Mm-hmm.
can clear most of his boards. But in the first 8 turns of the game, he played 4 tomes on me, so it became kind of unwinnable when he played 6 dragons in one turn and then played 5 more dragons on the next turn. So I don't know how any deck beats that actually.
It's hard. Tome is a very powerful card.
Yeah, and he also had the time to play Remembrance on the tome to draw it again. It's so gross. 4 tomes is not fair. 3 maybe. Like by the end of the game, I was actually kind of close. Hearing the life total, it kind of sounds like it wasn't close at all. But I got to a point where I stabilized that 1 life, and almost all of his dragons were gone. But when you're at 1, all he has to do now is find a Tomotai, blow up my AB, and then play Burn Them All. And then I only have 2 sigils left in my deck, so he ends up being able to burn me out anyways. So that
Mhm.
game was lost the moment he played the 4th tome, but I almost stabilized, if I lined up some really nice Oasis Respites and Sigil Solaces and Dissolving Shields, I technically could have maybe wound it back, but that game or that matchup is almost solely on me being able to remove every single dragon in his deck rather than hitting him for any points of damage. So
Yeah, that makes sense.
I got half his dragons. Let's move on to the main topic.
Patreon shout out first. So yeah, Patreon support has been still incredible. Really appreciative for everyone. Patreon has been popping off a lot. Lots of people talking about KO, sharing ideas on the deck list, and just some of their findings, some of their problems. Lots of people just talking and helping each other out, which is really cool to see. Also, people sharing some of their 3.0 deck lists and all of that. So the Discord has been a really nice resource. I've heard a lot of positive feedback from people about that, and just all the support from everyone's been awesome. So thank you so much. And if you want to check that out, you can at patreon.com/onthebubble. All right. Main topic: how to draft warrior.
Yeah, let's move right into how to draft warrior. I guess we will just start off as always. We're gonna talk about the commons and the rares, how many blocks of each one. Warrior is basically exactly the same as Brute, as we said last week. They have 19 commons and 9 rares. They have 12 3 blocks at common and 7 2 blocks at common. And all 9 of their rares block for 3 in this class. And obviously, this isn't including any of the generics or the dual class cards. Most of the dual class cards just block for 2, so honestly, you can assume all of them block for 2, except for the Clash of Agilities and stuff like that.
I believe Warrior technically has the most 3 blocks, so class does defend quite well. But notably, they don't have any 3 block attack actions. So anytime they're wanting to play like the 3 for 7s, which are still important in Warrior, those are 2 blocks. So that is sort of like the trade off there. But Warrior as a class overall defends really well, and because of all the attack reactions, they can also defend overpower pretty well. So yeah, Warrior blocks really good, which is very strong in this format. We've talked about that a bunch.
Yeah, just a note, like all 9 rares in Warrior are attack reactions, and they all block for 3. So honestly, the rare Warrior cards are just good in this set because they can block out overpower.
Yeah. Yeah, it really is big. And if you're playing into Warrior as say like Betsy or someone, you kind of have to keep in mind that they probably have like at least one attack reaction, or they could easily have like at least one attack reaction in their deck. So it's like harder to take that line where you go for the overpower. Like for lethal, especially. Like you don't want to like go to one, try to overpower them and have exact lethal, and then they have an attack reaction and block with it, and you're like, oh.
Yeah, like I had a game where I'm up against the Betsy, and they overpowered me for like 8 overpowered with like a wage, and I just like blocked with a attack reaction and is it rally the rear guard? Yeah, rally the rear guard and blocked it out for 8 with like 3 cards. Got the
Mhm.
might token and then, swung the sword for 3. And like that they were trying to kill me on that attack, so like they leaked a bunch of damage the turn before, and then now they're super behind. I kind of feel like if you're playing against Warrior, and if you're like Betsy, you probably don't want to be relying on overpower almost at all. And try and like keep your life total high, so then you don't like get to this like end game trap of like losing to any attack reaction.
Yeah, you just kind of get ground out in the end game because you can't really play around the attack reaction, or you have to give 2 cards to every sword swing, which means you fatigue pretty quickly in most scenarios. Like sometimes if it's like very, very, very late, you can get away with that if you're ahead enough. But I agree, having the life total is really important. It kind of reminds me of Uzuri in Outsiders, where like you just can't go low to Uzuri because of the spider's bites and the flip, and there's just like so many ways for her to get ahead when you get low. Warrior has a lot of the same things with all the reactions. You just gotta stay healthy, or it's just kind of untenable.
Yeah, yeah. Life total is king against Warrior.
Hmm.
But so that said, though, that means that if you are playing Warrior, you just want to get your opponent low, right? Like that's your kind of your goal in Warriors, to try and get them to like low single digits throughout the game, so you can try and like get them to the spot where they have to block with 2 cards every turn.
Yeah, your end game is getting them to that low life total. It doesn't even really matter if you're also that low life total, because if you ever get to keep a 2 card hand, you can do something like swing the sword, and you have the attack reaction. They have to give you 2 cards, and you get to arsenal that card, and then like every turn, your sword is worth 2 cards, and if they ever don't give you 2 cards, then you cash in the attack reaction. So you're just getting like card advantage every single turn in the late game once you have that attack reaction if they're playing around it. So just getting to that stage is like the most important part, regardless of kind of like your life total.
Yeah, it's super funny. It's like at that point you can even just like show them the attack reaction, and like there's nothing they can do about it either.
Yeah, typically it's very hard, unless they have like a Take It on the Chin or a Sheltered Cove, which I mean, you should be playing the instant prevent twos regardless, but they are really good against Warrior, and Sheltered Cove is like decent sideboard piece against Warrior, I think.
I think even easier card to pick up is Rally the Rearguard. I feel
Yeah.
like if you are worried about like losing to Warrior, you can just pick up a couple of rallies in like yellow or blue, and just have them in second cycle. And once you draw them, you can use that turn to pivot out, because once you block with a rally, like they can't really do, like if they react, then you just respond to the react by pumping it by 3, and that's a good way to get out of the attack react lock from the Warrior.
Yeah, you do need to have something that swings enough tempo or pressures enough from there to be able to turn around the game. But yeah, the rallies are definitely very nice.
I guess you want to start talking about the key cards right away?
Yeah, so as with all classes, 3 cost attacks, your 3 for 7s, for example, still very good. And your block 3s and block 4s, also very, very good. That does end up meaning that you're going to be playing some of these like the 1 for 3 buffs, like Edge Ahead and etc. There's like a cycle that lets you wage. There's like Engage Swiftblade. They're all kind of similar-ish in my books. And the 1 for 3 rate on them isn't fantastic, but the fact that they block 3 is good, and then they let you like kind of play multiple hand sizes. So like if you get left with extra cards, you can play it. If you don't have extra cards, you don't play it is really nice. And sometimes the wages are really nice because like if you like wage an attack for 5 and you have an arsenal and 1 floating, like your opponent can't really block it. And even though that 2 card 5 is inefficient, we kind of talked about like the importance of getting them low. So those 3 blocks, even though the rate on them isn't good, are pretty important because they don't block. You get an agility, you get them 5 life, you get them closer to your end game. It just kind of does like everything that you want. So those cards are like quite solid at basically every pitch because they block 3 and they're flexible.
It makes it awkward for your opponent to do anything against them too. So like
Mm.
I tend to just like decks where my deck has like 9 copies of these like edge ahead, hold'em, engage Switchblade type cards, and just like like the more I have, the I feel like just because they block for 3 and like you get to have like a very consistent game plan. I feel like that's like the Warriors' biggest edge is that you get to have a really consistent game, no matter what point, like no matter like where you are in the game, essentially.
Yeah, I think the combination of the consistency with the strong end game just makes Warrior like just like very solid. I don't know. It feels like Warrior doesn't maybe have like the same like power spike that like Brute can, for example. Like Brute can just have like the craziest turns. Warrior turns are usually not quite as explosive, but they're like very consistent, like kind of always in the game. They defend well. They have a good end game. They're just like really kind of well rounded, I guess.
Yeah, like just because you're like 4 points behind as Warrior, you don't give up that game, or like 5 points behind, you don't give up that game because like you can like make that up by like one good turn of like an attack reaction where they didn't expect it, or like there's just so many things you can do, like block out for 9, and then once you make an agility, go pitch a yellow dagger. There's so many good lines, and like devalues your opponent's cards. And I like Warrior in this set, but at the same time, it's like the most fair class. Do you agree with that?
Yeah, I agree. It doesn't feel like anything Warriors doing is like necessarily like it all looks like kind of not that great. And if you just like apply like the math to it, you're like 2 card 5 isn't good. Like you get the agility, then it's like a 2 card 7 because you swing sabers twice and you have the +3, and like that's not that exciting. But like the way that it all fits together is really good. And I think the synergy between like disincentivizing your opponent from blocking, but then having a good endgame with the attack reactions is like really interesting and kind of like powerful in a way that like the numbers don't necessarily tell the whole picture. So yeah, I like Warrior in the set. It's really good. It's also often drafted. I think like Warrior and Brute are very popular, and then Guardian is less popular, which I think is correct too. Like Guardian has the most shallow card pool, but often Warrior is very contested, is what I found.
And talking about the 3 blocks and the 4 blocks, I think the best rare in this class will be Take the Upper Hand, and this is the card that's going to be definitely a key card that you're going to be looking out for. I like this card in both red and blue. The red one just being a head jab that blocks for 3 essentially, on a attack that's wagering this chain link, and the blue being just like a blue 3 block that is super solid. I feel like decks with Take the Upper Hand and decks without Take the Upper Hand is kind of night and day in both heroes.
I do agree with that. The zero cost is just so huge, and you said it's a head jab, and like that's true, but the times where you like have a wage agility for 7 and none floating and 1 card, and then your opponent gives you like 2 cards in equipment or 3 cards to block it out, and you get to get not only the 3 damage in, but also that agility token, and you took like most of their hand, is just it's so good. Like the extra token on top and after they've already blocked to deny the token just feels like such a big swing that it's like even better than the 3 damage. There, I agree. These cards are really good. You want to make sure you have like a few wages to pair with it. You just kind of want those cards anyways, and I don't think you need like a ton of wages for the card to be very good in your deck.
Yeah, you just like if you have like 1 or 2 wage, like the 3 costs wage, and then if you have a bunch of these like edge aheads, the hold'ems, like you'll have enough cards that's going to be wagering in both Kasai and Olympia. Olympia mostly because you want to be wagering in Olympia, but even in Kasai where you don't even care that much about wagering, it's not hard to set this up. And it's kind of sits nicely in your arsenal if you want to arsenal it, and you know, in all the scenarios where you don't want to play it, you block with it. Like it still blocks for 3. I kind of don't understand why this card blocks for 3.
Yeah, the card feels really pushed. I think that this is meant to be sort of like a constructed staple, and the power level on it is like really, really high. I don't think Wage totally worked out in constructed, so that's maybe why. Although we have seen some Olympia starting to do well, but yeah, I think that like any like Olympia deck is like gonna have this card in it, and it kind of feels like this is like very constructed power level, which makes it like very, very good and limited. So besides the 3 blocks and take the upper hand, the other thing you want is the agility makers. We talked about this a lot last week in Brute, and Warrior wants agilities too, especially because you have the 2 swords. So sometimes just blocking down and going sword sword for 2 and 2 is really good. And then it's like also like kind of hard to block because of the Centauri Saber's tech. So if they block with like a 2-block attack, then it goes to 3 and you get a little bit of extra value. So the agilities are just like really, really, really good in Warrior. And a lot of the same cards we talked about in Brute are good. So your agile windups are still strong. Flat trackers is probably the best of the best because it starts in play. Lead with agility red and take it on the chin, also really, really premium. But pretty much like all of the cards that make agilities are pretty good. And the less conditional they are, the better, I would say.
Unlike in Brute, where the agility means that you have to keep cards in your hand, in Warrior, agility, you don't actually have to keep anything but a yellow in your hand to convert the agility, which makes the agility, I think, a little bit more impactful, or like almost a little bit better than in Brutes. I think the difference will be like Brutes have the higher ceiling, a 14 damage turn with an agility, whereas in Warrior, it's typically going to be like a 9 damage turn or like an 11 damage turn more often than what Brute can do.
Yeah, and I like what you said about being able to just like it being more flexible because you can just play it as like a 1 card hand. That's something that Brute really can't do. You basically always need at least 3 cards in Brute, like attack plus 2 pitch cards if you're just doing like attack into claw. So it's like a pretty big commitment, whereas Warrior just always has the option to use more cards, use less cards, kind of like what we were talking about earlier, just like that hand flexibility in Warrior is really, really good, and it makes agility strong in Warrior for maybe kind of like different reasons or in like a little bit of a different way than Brute.
Following up with that, that also makes the 2 cost attacks become more important in Warrior than
Mm-hmm.
in other classes. Things like Rising
Rising
Speed and
energy.
yeah, and Rising Energy.
Yeah.
Those 2 cost attacks become much better because you get to go pop an agility, attack with Centauri Saber, and with Rising Energy, and it's just like that's a solid 2 card hand with an agility. It's a 2 card 8. So this is more, I guess, more for Kasai than for Olympia. But just just keep in mind that if you have enough ways to make agility, you kind of want these like rising energies in your deck. So then you can convert the agility token with an attack rather than just dagger dagger, or sorry, sword sword, because it's still better to use an attack to prep more damage on the board than to do sword sword. If you only do sword sword for the whole game, you do end up in a risk of like falling behind to these like decks that are presenting 2 card 7s at you.
Yeah, I think you can also just kind of fatigue.
Yeah, I think so too.
The other nice thing, I agree with you about the 2 costs. The other nice thing about them is that all of the attack reactions and all of the 1 for 3 block 3 buffs, like edge ahead and that, all affect the next warrior attack. So especially the rising energy and rising speed. So that's the 2 for 6 that costs 1 less if you've drawn a card, and the 2 for 5 that costs 1 less, or sorry, that has go again if you've drawn a card. Those cards all pair really nicely with all these like 1 cost buffs and 1 cost attack reactions. You can do sort of like 3 card 9, 3 card 8, which is not like super, super exciting, but it's still like totally fine. And having that flexibility to use it on your agility turn to be above rate, or just like convert a 3 card hand in a pretty respectable way is really strong. Also, just like waging for 8 or 9 is really hard to block in this format. Like if you like wage an agility for 9, Warrior can sometimes make use of that, but like Brute and Guardian definitely can't. There's no way they can block 9 and then like also use the agility, so it's really powerful.
But talking about the 2 cost, there's one more thing I want to note. There's a card called Adrenaline Rush in this set. I would stay away from this card if possible. Like, maybe 1 copy will be okay in your warrior deck. Like, 2 reds might be okay, like, if your draft is going kind of poorly. But ideally, you kind of don't want this card because, as Yuki said, like, a lot of the 1 cost buffs buff the next warrior card, and Adrenaline Rush being a generic, non-universal, like, it doesn't get buffed by these cards, and that's a real downside in this set that I found. Many times where I'm just like, I have hands where it looks like the best line is to play lead with speed into Adrenaline Rush, but then you're like, oh, I actually can't lead with speed into Adrenaline Rush because it doesn't get the buff. It's just like you get to these spots where the Adrenaline Rush not getting buffed by like Edge Ahead or Hold'em is a real downside, and I would I would try and not draft Adrenaline Rush if possible, and like take these Warrior 2 cost attacks instead, even though Adrenaline Rush can attack for 7 and Rising Energy only attacks for 6. Like, it's still, I think, a real downside it not being a warrior card.
I agree with all of that. I think that the warrior type is huge, and I think the same is true for like the guardians and the brutes. They just have so many like 2 card 7s already that you don't need a conditional 2 card 7 that blocks 2 and also doesn't work with the buffs. It's just sort of like Adrenaline and Rush is like a card that we've seen in other sets and was very strong there, but just doesn't, because of the way this set is set up. It's just okay. It's like kind of filler. I'd prefer not to have it. Yeah, so we talked about those 2 costs. I think Rising Energy Red is sort of like the most universal one, so that's the 2 for 6 that costs 1 less. This card's just real nice. 2 for 6 is a great stat line. It pairs nicely with a gold as well. Like you can pop a gold, play Rising Energy as like a 1 card 6, and then you get an arsenal. That's really good. So yeah, I think that's sort of like another key card I'm looking for is specifically Rising Energy Red. Although the Rising Speed is also very good in Kasai specifically because of like you probably have the draw effects to pair with it and all the agility to pair with it to go wide.
Yeah, Rising Speed in Kasai is kind of gross because you get to go pitch a blue into the gold, have 1 resource floating, and then you can pitch the card you drew. If it's a red, you can still attack with Rising Speed. It has go again, then you can dagger for free. And then if you draw anything that's not a red, you get to just have floating resource to play your reactions or hold'ems and stuff like that from your arsenal if you have one hand. If you have one handy in there, I think it becomes a pretty consistent 1 card 7 essentially with the gold.
Yeah, this is something that like I think I was a little bit low on early in the format. I was like, oh, it's not that good. It's just fine. And like the more that I saw people play it, I'm like, okay, like this is very real. And I think your Kasai decks actively want Rising Speed. It's still playable in Olympia, but probably a lot worse because you probably don't really have the card draw to support it. But, I mean, I guess you do have the gold. It's probably still fine in Olympia, honestly, but it's like especially good in Kasai.
Combination of the swords costing 0 after you crack the gold, it makes Rising
Yeah,
Speed better, whereas
yeah.
the Rising Energy is because it doesn't have the go again, you're not really looking to swing the sword after, so
Mhm.
it's probably just like universally better in like Olympia and Kasai as well. Yeah.
Okay, so we did an episode all about the weapons in Warrior and all the equipments. I just kind of want to revisit Hot Streak and Parry Blade now that we played with it a little bit. I think that Jay and I both agree Hot Streak is just really good. It kind of like prevents your opponent from blocking it a lot of the time because it will get go again, and like Guardian and Brute tend to have a lot of attacks. So it's like very hard to block, and we kind of talked about that idea of having like sticky damage, like damage that actually affects their life total being really valuable because you just want to get them to low life. So Hot Streak plays into that in the early game, and then in the late game they kind of have to block it because they're too low, and then you just get like go again for free a lot of times. So Hot Streak is just like super powerful and really impressive, and I think if you're seeing people with like present a Hot Streak, you're wanting to get some non-attack actions, or sorry, just like some things that aren't attacks that can block at the bottom of your deck, whether those are reactions, non-attacks, whatever. Like you want something at the bottom of your deck to block that in the late game.
Hot Streak pairs really well with Hold'em and Edge Ahead. Like,
Mhm.
it pairs ridiculously well. Like, the grossest things that happen in the Warrior games is when they present Hot Streak and then they go red Hold'em into Hot Streak for 5. And then they wager it, and you're just like, if I block this, they're gonna come at me for the saber. So it's like I'm giving them +2 on the attack if I block, but like, what am I gonna do? Just eat 5 and give them a vigor so they get to pop off, or if they have an edge ahead, like they get an agility, so then like it kind of doesn't matter the hot streak gets go again next turn. It's like every scenario becomes so bad once they play an edge ahead or hold them. It's hot streak creates those scenarios like, and it's like that's not even hard to create that scenario, right? Like all you had to do was play it one non-attack action. Like you're just in an awful spot like right away. It's kind of gross.
How aggressively are you taking Hot Streak? Like, would you pick one this card? Is it that good? Where are you hoping to take Hot Streak? I haven't really gotten to play with this card, but I've played against it a bunch.
Last time I got it, I pack one pick one it, and it was pretty good. The other time, I just don't see this card often.
Yeah.
So I don't know if it's overrated. I don't think it's overrated. So I would try and pick it up kind of early, like the first couple picks if possible, and like build my deck around Hot Streak if that's possible. But like I would definitely just like be okay pack one pick oneing it and moving away from Warrior as well.
Yeah, that makes sense. My impression of the card is that it's powerful enough to do it, but I haven't. Yeah, I just haven't really been seeing the cards in draft. Other people have been picking it up, and I think understanding how powerful it is. So
I think the big difference is like, in the Guardian episode we talked about Miller's Grindstone,
mhm.
and I thought that card was overrated. I think the big difference between Hot Streak and Miller's Grindstone is that Hot Streak is like a strategy on its own that you're like trying to build around Hot Streak, whereas Miller's Grindstone is more of like, this is a good generic attack that I'm going to be attacking with it like maybe 2 times throughout the game. Hot Streak is a kind of card where you're going to be attacking with it like constantly every turn of the game and forcing your opponent in bad spots.
Yeah, I agree with all of that. Hot Streak really good. The other weapon though, Parry Blade. I have played with this one. I don't know that I'm all that impressed, honestly. I think it's pretty decent into the Warriors because like it cleanly blocks a saber and Warriors like want a sword pretty often. So you can usually turn it on against Warriors. But like Guardian really doesn't. We kind of talked about it. Guardian doesn't really want to be swinging the hammer, and I think that Brute doesn't necessarily have to be swinging the claw either, and can like choose not to swing the claw in the late game. A lot of times, they can like kind of build their play patterns around this. When they do that, it's just like you just have like a worse Centauri saber, and the saber is like really relevant against Guardian and Brute too because they have like so many attacks that block. They don't have like all the reactions that Warrior has and all the non-attacks that Warrior has. So I think Parry Blade's like almost just maybe worse than Saber into Guardian and Brute, which makes me just like not really like this card that much. Like if I get it really late, I'll pick it up. It's fine, but I don't think it's that great.
Yeah, I think if I have a Parry Blade in my pool, I'm definitely playing it. I feel like I'm not actually boarding it out.
Mm,
Even if it's against Guardian or Brute, just because like it disincentivizes the weapon attack, and I feel like that is actually like an upside.
that's
Um,
fair.
but yeah, I don't think I'm gonna be picking this card early to try and play it. It'll be like, oh, I get past the Parry Blade. Cool, it might be an upgrade to Centauri Saber. But yeah, I do agree with you. It's like two Centauri Saber or Parry Blade Centauri Saber. They both kind of feel the same.
Yeah, yeah. The Warrior Mirror is like really where the card was like, okay, this is like pretty good. Everywhere else it was just like, I really don't care about this card. Was like basically what I felt like. So I don't know. It's fine, but don't pick it highly. I guess on that topic of cards that are fine but don't pick highly, let's move into our overrated cards. We talked about these last week on the Brute episode, but Clash of Agility and Test of Agility, losing clashes for agility is really bad, and in Warrior you just have such a low attack density that I really don't like these agility clash cards in Warrior. I think it's just kind of asking for trouble. I think I would pretty much like pretty hard avoid these if I can. I don't know about you.
Yeah, I would personally avoid them. I have played against the warrior that did play it and win clashes against me, and when that happens, it feels really unfair
Hmm.
because they just go block for 4 with test of agility, pitch a card, sword, and I'm like, this is not fair, like, and then they're gonna draw a 7 power attack on the following turn. and you're like, this is really not fair. But I think on average, because Warrior has so many attack reactions that they want to play and the non-attack actions at common, you're gonna lose a lot of clashes. And if you play Test of Agility, you have to be okay giving them the agility token.
which is usually pretty scary. So I would be careful there. Test of Vigor, though, Test of Vigor is okay. I think usually giving the Vigor is okay. We've talked about this a bunch, but yeah. The next cards that I want to talk about are the yellow attack reactions, especially the block twos. The block threes are kind of okay because they're still just block threes. But like your yellow agile engagement or your yellow vigorous engagement, those cards are so not great. Like they're just like never good. Like pitching a yellow doesn't feel good, especially if you have like a 3 for 7 with it. It can close in the end game. That's probably its like biggest strength, but it's just like when you block with it, it's not good. When you pay 1 for 2 damage, it's not good. It just feels like these cards are just like almost every time I draw it, I'm just like, oh man, there's just like no way for this card to be efficient. It's just like always kind of bad. So not to say you can't like play any of them, but like you don't want to be picking these cards up aggressively. Like I'm kind of hoping not to have to play these.
I kind of like one in my deck. I think the first
Yeah.
copy is like actively really good.
Okay.
So you want to put it into your pitch stack and then just have it late game where your opponent's at 2 life, and it's just like, you know, you fork them.
Mhm.
You once you pitch it, they know it, and then they can't play around it. So I think the first one is good, and it naturally fits into like your pitch a yellow sword kind of turns. So I do like the first copy of the yellow one, but I'm trying to wheel this card
Yeah.
and not like I'm not actively trying to pick it up. Like I'm gonna see one in the draft on the wheel somewhere in the draft, and if you don't, you're probably in the wrong class. Like it's probably overdrafted.
Yeah, I think I agree with all of that. And I think that's sort of like what I meant by like I'm not trying to pick this up is I feel like I probably wind up getting one of these whether I want it or not. And I agree that playing like one of them in your deck is like actually pretty okay because of that end game reach that we talked about. But oh, if you have a deck with like 3 or 4 of these, it feels bad. It feels really, really bad.
Yeah, it does feel bad. It's still a little bit better, or it's significantly better than yellow trade-ins, I think.
Yeah, there's worse cards in the set, but like I think that like some people are think that like, oh, it's still an attack reaction, it can give me tokens, it's great. I haven't been impressed with these cards, and I'm hoping not to include them. Is basically kind of where I'm at. But you can play them. There's worse cards in the set, that's for sure.
Yeah, I think the play patterns once people's like really figured out warrior with these attack reactions, like the common ones, is that because people stop blocking with attack actions that often to the Centauri sabers, these reactions don't actually generate tokens that often.
Yeah, I agree with that. It's like like occasionally you get the token and it's kind of nice upside, but most of the time it's just like I basically just view it as like a plus whatever, like 3 at red or +2 at yellow, and otherwise blank text. If you get the token, it's fantastic. It just doesn't line up all that often, unfortunately.
There was a game I played yesterday where I had a red attack reaction in Arsenal, and I was just waiting for this guy to block my saber with an attack action, and for 4 turns they didn't. And
Mm-hmm.
I'm just like, oh, this is stuck here forever. And like on one of the turns, I was like, okay, I'm gonna cash it out so I can Arsenal a different card. But like, it kind of felt like, man, I'm never getting this agility token off this card.
Yeah, I've had very much the same experience with it, and maybe on that note, it's a good time to talk about another overrated card we have, Fatal Engagement, especially at red and yellow. This is the rare 2 cost warrior attack reaction that at red gives +5. It can buff any type of attack, which is fantastic, but you can only buff the attack if it's defended. Sorry, it can buff any type of attack action, but you can only buff it if it's defended by an attack. Oh no, it's any.
Yeah, it's any attack. You can buff any attack, but you can only play it if an attack action card is defending this chain link.
Yes, I read the card like 3 times in 3 different ways. And it turns out what I thought it did at the start was correct. Yeah, so you can buff your sword with this, but they have to defend with an attack action. And like we talked about, like there's just so many things disincentivizing people from doing that, that the red and yellow is just like kind of get stuck. Like I've had like the same experience with this card, just like arsenaling and being like, I can't clear this card for forever. Like I remember like in a warrior mirror having this in arsenal and just being like, oh man, I got them in this end game, it's great. And then they just like block for like 5 straight turns with non-attacks. I'm like, well, this is really bad for me. Like, so I don't know. They still block 3. They're not unplayable, but like I don't think these are high picks. The blue one though, blue one pretty good. Blue that gives +3 real solid. It's also a blue block 3. That's not an attack. I like the blue fatal engagement quite a lot, but the red and yellow, like they're still playable. They're still 3 blocks, but like I don't know. Be careful with these cards.
Yeah, the blue fatal engagement just acts really nicely because you pitch them early, and it comes around on your second cycle, and that's the point where your opponent's gonna be at 2 or 3, and now they're at a spot where, like, what are they gonna do? Not block your saber that's lethal? So they have to block it, and then you give it +3, and it's still lethal again. So it's it buffing for 3, unlike the other blue reactions, is kind of nice because all the other blue attack reactions in the set buff for only 1, and typically buffing for 1 isn't good enough. Like, that's the card you're gonna be end up drawing if you are pitching the blues in like the first couple turns of the game, which is a natural thing to do. So when you draw these like blue edge ahead, blue hold'ems, blue engage swift blades, and you're just like, like they're nice block 3s, but like you don't really want to be playing them, right? Like, or like the blue vigorous engagement, you just like playing them doesn't really net you enough like advantage to like actually close the game. But fatal engagement is an actual impactful card when you play it from your hand. So it's it's like a significant upgrade than all the other warrior cards in the set, I think.
Yeah, I agree. Blue one quite good. Red and yellow fine, but be careful. I don't think they're super high picks, and be very careful about arsenaling them.
It's really funny though. It's like fatal engagement is so good if your opponent doesn't know it exists in the format.
Yeah, but people do know it exists, and I think the other problem is like if it was just fatal engagement, it'd be better because it's just like, oh, there's like one card at rare, like it's hard to want to play around it, but like when your Centauri sabers punish them for blocking with attack actions, a lot of the attack actions block for 2. You have vigorous engagement and agile engagement as well as like other punisher effects. Even to like a lesser extent, cut the deck. Like there's just like so many things that disincentivize your opponent from blocking with attack actions that like it really does add up and make this card pretty hard to turn on a lot of the time.
Okay, Yuki. What about this hot take? Okay, I don't know if it's right, but what if you just like presented 2 parry blades? Now they don't have like now they're incentivized to block with their attack actions, right? Because it doesn't get +1 because you can only attack with parry blade.
I guess that's technically true. I don't know. I kind of hate it.
Maybe you get them, you just go like double parry blade and then just like start being like, man, I got double rare weapon.
Jay. Did you know that Parry Blade can let you get down but not outed? Because it's an equipment. It
Yep,
feels
yep.
so bad. It feels so bad. I forgot to mention that when I was talking about this. It counts as an equipment for down but not out, which just feels bad.
I got somebody they cracked their last shelter cove, is it called?
Mm-hmm.
In response to the my down but not out. And then I'm just like, it's 8 overpowered. And they're like, why? I'm like, you have this card called Parry Blade that's an equipment. And they blew up.
Yeah, that makes sense.
Yeah, they played around. They tried to play around down but not out. There are text on some of these cards that are kind of gross.
That's another reason that Parry Blade is like it's like not a big reason, but it doesn't help when the card is already just sort of like borderline, and then you have like this other effect that punishes it. It's just like, okay. Yeah, I just realized that we forgot to talk about that when we talked about Parry Blade and it kind of came up. Anyways, our final overrated card, Beckon Applause. This is the gloves that gets plus block if you have an agility and if you have a vigor. We kind of talked about this. Like the brute, like raw meat is really good because KO spots you the might tokens, but in Warrior and Guardian, it's a little bit harder. I think Beckon Applause is like fine, you can pick it up, but it's sort of like the more if I have like goblets of blood run wine that gives you both of them, and I have like the other like I have flat trackers and vigor girth, I like this card. But if I don't have like reliable ways to generate both tokens, I think it's pretty hard to turn on, and the adversity gloves are kind of just like often better or similar.
Yeah, I agree. Like even if it's like the if you have lower life, the glove piece, like it's just kind of more reliable to like block with that than Beckon Applause sometimes.
Hmm.
I've had like a warrior deck where I didn't have a goblet, but I just had the two armor pieces that lets me make agility, the flat trackers, and the vigor girth. It's just like that wasn't enough. Like I feel like in warrior, it's kind of rare where you want to be like cracking both of them and trying to convert both. That
Hmm.
it felt kind of awkward where there's so many turns where I'm just like, oh, I just want the agility, so I'm gonna crack just the agility, but now it feels like I'm wasting the spec and applause if I don't crack the vigor. But then I'm kind of sure I have no way to convert this vigor token. So just like, I lose one block on this vigor girth, but like then I lose one block on the beckon applause. And like if I don't have multiple goblets in my deck, I kind of don't like this card. And I feel like some people are picking this card up a little bit too highly. And I'm kind of at this point I'm kind of okay with like the blade break for one if you have lower life ones as well. But like, embrace adversary, the one if your opponent cracks a might, it gets the block too. That one's really good. So, I kinda like that better than Beckon Applause at this point.
I think it does depend on your deck and like how good you are generating tokens, but in general, I agree that I think Beckon Applause, like Stand Ground, is just a little hard to turn on reliably and just okay.
Yeah, maybe like it gets like a build around. It's like a build around card where
Yeah.
once you have like two goblet of wines, then you want like a beck and applause, so then like you can maximize both cards. But like, so it's I guess like a mini combo that you want to like put together.
Yeah, I think I agree with that. But I think that just like on its own, this isn't a powerful card. And because of that, I don't like I talked about how I'm a big fan of picking equipment pretty aggressively, and I still think that that is true. But Beck and Applause, I'm wanting to pick up like a fair bit later in the pack just because it is like kind of conditional and your deck might not leverage it as well as you would like, unfortunately. So, not a bad card, but just maybe don't consider when you're picking it up and what you're trading off for it. I think often just like a really strong in deck card can be better than Beck and Applause.
Yeah, I like a blue 3 block or like
Mhm.
like a blue 3 block is better than the beck and applause, I think.
Yeah, I think a lot of times, yeah.
Let's talk about the actual heroes in specific. So, like, what's good for Kasai exactly, and what's good for Olympia exactly. Who do you want to talk about first?
Let's start with Kasai, because I think that Kasai is sort of like often your default warrior, not to the extent that KO is your default brute, but I think that Kasai is the one that you draft like more often. So from Kasai's hero ability, we kind of want like a couple things. She rewards you for drawing cards to make your swords free, which you do kind of get from gold, so it's like not super hard to get this, but it does make like draw swords in particular really good in Kasai because it's kind of like a 3 for 0 that blocks 3 and then makes all your swords free. So it's like draw swords is really powerful. And then the other thing that she wants is she wants agility tokens because the discount on your swords is worth more if you're able to swing twice, basically. So really like card draw from either gold or draw swords is like important. And the agility tokens, which you kind of want anyways, are really important in Kasai. And I think that if you're looking to be Kasai, like draw swords is a key card, and having like some amount of agility tokens to really enable her ability is like kind of the main things I'm looking for. Would you agree with that, Jay?
Yeah, the question: do you like yellow draw swords?
It's okay.
I'm like, I used to like it, and then I'm like starting to go down on it more and more as I play the set. Like, as a yellow 3 block, it's obviously great, but like I'm almost never wanting to play yellow draw swords anymore. I know the red one's really good, obviously
Yeah.
because it's just like it feels like so on rate, but I feel like the yellow one has some issues of like depending on the card you draw or like the just like it only buffing 2 damage feels like it's not impactful enough for me to want to play it and end up like I'm always in a spot where like, oh, this is just a better card to block with.
Yeah, I think I agree with that. I think in general, I'm not hoping to play the yellow draw swords. You can play it if you have extra cards, but I'm not usually like, oh, I'm gonna keep this yellow draw swords and I'm gonna get them. But I think it just being like a yellow 3 block is still pretty good in Kasai because you want yellows in your discard to turn on your hero ability. I don't think you need to like go out of your way for this. You're probably going to wind up with some yellows anyways, just because it's draft. But I do like it mostly for the yellow 3 block aspect. You can play it, but yeah, I agree. It's like especially the red one that's good.
Yeah, yeah, that's what I thought. Yeah.
Yeah, so I think those are kind of like the main things I'm looking for to be Kasai. The other one is Rising Speed. We talked about this. This is the 2 for 5 that gets go again. If you've drawn a card, just pairs really nicely with their hero ability, giving the swords like a free swing. It's like harder to make this card work in Olympia just because it gets very expensive to like you spend 2 to draw a card probably from a gold, then you spend 2 on this, and then you have to spend resources on your sword swings, and it's just like it just gets really really expensive. Whereas in Kasai, it's like a lot more reliable. So yeah, Rising Speed also good. And I think like the big takeaway here is even though we're saying like these are the things you need to make Kasai work, like we talked about it, agility tokens are just the best token in the set and you want agility tokens in your deck. And you kind of get card draw from her second ability, which makes you gold anyways. So like Kasai doesn't need a lot to come together. She comes together very, very easily. And I think that for a lot of decks, your default is going to be Kasai. And then there's like certain things that you're looking for that maybe lean you towards being Olympia.
Yeah, I feel like you need a reason to be Olympia rather than the other way around. I don't think you need a reason to be Kasai. The problem with Olympia ends up being like if its hero ability is if it the first time each of your attacks wins a wager, create a gold token. So if you are just like lacking cards with wager on it, you just don't want to be Olympia, so you end up on Kasai. Or if you don't have enough reactions to push over the wager attacks, you kind of want to be Kasai again.
Or if you
So
don't have wager.
yeah, I just like there's just so many reasons be like, oh, I probably shouldn't be Olympia because I can't use his hero ability. So instead of having a blank hero ability, I'd rather have the at least the top line of text of like my swords might cost 0 on one random turn, and otherwise being basically a blank hero as well.
Well, you're probably also going to get to make or threaten like 1 to 2 gold in the game pretty freely as well as Kasai, which is like not nothing. Whereas Olympia, like you need to win the wagers to get those golds. So I think that Kasai is just like you're pretty likely to get at least a little bit of value out of her.
You know what I think about these warriors? I feel like the warrior's hero ability kind of doesn't matter in like it does matter because like yes they have text and you get to use it, but like I found that like cracking golden warrior isn't actually like so impactful that it wins you games, and
Yeah.
it feels like if Kasai was a blank hero, I could have won like a lot of the games I've ended up winning as Kasai, or like the same as Olympia. It's like I've had an Olympia game where you know he was a blank hero. Like I've never won a wager, and I didn't even wager a single card, and I won the game because Saber is still kind of good.
Yeah, I think Warrior kind of relies on the hero ability the least of any class in this set.
Almost all of the power in Warrior comes from attack reactions existing more than like what the hero actually says on the card. And that's just not true for like Guardian. Like Betsy is a hero that like wins games because of overpower. Victor is a hero that wins games because he got to draw extra cards. KO is literally gets might tokens every other turn for no reason. Reinar
Yeah.
Reinar ends games because he's Reinhar, but like yeah, I feel like Warrior is one of those the class in the set where its power comes from like the actual in deck cards rather than the hero ability.
Yeah, the hero ability is often just a way to get like a little bit of extra value, but it doesn't feel quite. I think most of the time it doesn't feel quite as central to the deck as other things. I guess like you can have the Kasai deck with like a bunch of draw swords and a bunch of agility, and like yeah, that deck's probably nuts, but it's just often you don't get all those pieces because they're contested, and then you just like get value out of it like a little bit here and there. Or like yeah,
Yeah, I think the 3-0 warrior decks are the ones that get to leverage their hero abilities.
yes.
And then like the 2-1 warrior decks are the ones that like couldn't actually like maximize the hero abilities.
Yeah, I think I generally agree with that. Although sometimes you can just win anyways, so
Yeah, that's just like you just get him with a take the upper hand, and you're like, oh, wow, this card was like a 0 for 5 in value.
yeah, it's definitely pretty good. So okay, let's talk about Olympia then, because we kind of covered Kasai. So I think one of the big reasons to be Olympia is the prized Galea. Just temper 2 equipment, really, really good. We've talked about it. I think Prize Galea is like quite a bit better than the Hood of Red Sand for Kasai, and like you can be like, I'm a Kasai deck, and then you see Prize Galea, and you should like probably just pick it up and be Olympia. I think the card is like that good. So like it's kind of like a boring thing to say, but like the specialization hat for Olympia is like a real reason to be Olympia.
Yeah, I agree. Something to keep in mind is once you have Prize Galea, you know what card gets really, really good? Take the upper hand.
Yeah, because you can pay 1 to wager a gold as a reaction and then take the upper hand them. So just like yeah, it's just like always looming. It's impossible to play around. You get 2 gold. It's like it's really good.
Yeah, and it's just like it's like it's face up on the board, but like it's like it's not like you can play around it either, right? Like it's they're gonna give
Yeah.
two. You're gonna get 2 gold when they have it, and you're never gonna play around it. It's kind of gross.
Yeah. And I think that take the upper hand is like kind of a key card for Olympia in general. Like it's still very good in Kasai. I think it's just like one of the best warrior cards. But I think if I'm thinking of playing Olympia for a reason other than Prize Galea, I probably want take the upper hands because just like the 0 cost way to push over your wagers is so important because Olympia kind of feels like a deck that like can like when you have the good version of Olympia, I think he can like snowball these tokens a little bit and keep like winning his wagers, and it's like hard to block him out. But you need to get that going, and take the upper hand is like by far the best way to do it. So not to say like you have take the upper hand, you're an Olympia deck, but if I'm going to consider playing Olympia and I don't have Prize Galea, especially, I probably want some number of take the upper hands. I think it's like pretty important for him.
Yeah, and the other important will be just the 3 cost wage cards. You just want
Mm-hmm.
a big density of them, so then you can actually try and like turn on Olympia's ability. If you only have like 2 or 3 like wage agility or like wage vigor, it might not be enough to play Olympia, just because like you can't always wager them. Like you're gonna be in these spots where if you wager it and they get to block it out, you're gonna lose, and if you just clearly don't have a reaction, like just that's your last 2 cards to play, you can't wager that attack. And when you don't wager it, now they don't have to block it either. So, and then because you didn't wager, you don't get the gold. So it's like so many things can go wrong if you only have like 2 to 3 wage, like wage agility or wage vigor, wage gold, those kinds of stuff. You do want to have like a density of those, even if it's in yellow. I think the yellow ones are okay in Olympia more so than in the other heroes.
Yeah, agree with that. And we talked about the importance of agility in Kasai to leverage your hero ability. I think another reason you can sometimes wind up Olympia is like if you're a Kasai and you have no agility and no card draw, you probably shouldn't be warrior, but like there's a chance you're better off just being Olympia because of the wages. So like Kasai does need something to get value out of her cards, and like sometimes you just have these warrior decks where it's just like, yeah, I have like 4 ways to wage, and that extra gold might just be worth more. I think you're hoping that you're like not warrior in that situation, but it can happen.
Yeah, I guess so. Yeah.
Yeah, yeah. I would also say that Olympia is sort of like I think of the two, Olympia likes vigor more and agility less because like you don't get the discount on your swords, so the agility is like a little less synergistic. You can still saber, so agility is like still very good. But the other reason you want the vigors is that it helps you play the attack reaction. So if you like wage a vigor and then you take the upper hand, then you get a vigor and a gold. And then in the next turn, if you wage again, you now have one resource floating for your next like attack reaction. That doesn't necessarily have to be a take the upper hand. It could be like a cut the deck or a vigorous engagement, and then you can push it over again. And like you can kind of like roll. You can almost kind of like roll vigor tokens with Olympia, which is quite strong and kind of like fixes his curve a little bit. And I think is pretty important. Also, the vigor tokens do have synergy with the golds. So if you have two vigors and a gold, you can just use those two vigors to draw a card. Similarly, if you have a vigor and two golds, pitching a blue with a vigor is potentially two cards. So you've like traded your blue for two random cards at the cost of your golds. So I think that the vigor and gold has real synergy in this set. And because of that, because Olympia is just kind of like creating lots of gold for free, ideally, if he's doing his thing, vigors fit nicely into him. So like in general, Olympia just has like nice play patterns with vigors in a way that I think Kasai can like sometimes not really have a good use for vigors.
Yeah, I agree with that. I think the vigor tokens not so good in Kasai. Like it's just so much more awkward to use the vigor token in Kasai than in Olympia. What about the majestic specialization cards like Up the Ante? Do you like those in Olympia?
Yeah, Up the Ante is insane. I think Up the Ante is another reason to be Olympia. Just like such a premium blue can be a zero cost attack reaction that just like bumps over by one if you want. You can like pitch this in the late game and then it's just like a +3. Like if you pitch a blue into this, it's like a +3 that gives you agility, vigor, gold. And it's just like modal, it's like flexible to fill out your resource curve. Up the Ante is like really, really, really impressive, I think. Pretty big reason to be Olympia. And I think on a similar note, Double Down is also very good in Olympia if you have the other pieces for it. So Double Down is the
Yeah, Double Down's the Guardian Warrior action that costs 2 at red. It's a majestic, so it's only existed at red. And it says you may destroy a gold you control rather than pay Double Down's cost. The next attack that wagers this turn gets +3 in overpower. And it says if a hero would create one or more tokens from a wager this turn, instead they create that many +1 of each of those tokens.
so like zero, like like you kind of need cards to enable this because like you need the wagers to go with this. You ideally want the golds to make this free, but like when it's free and it's like a zero cost +3 that gives overpower and gives you extra tokens, it's really good. So like I think like Up the Ante and Galea are like enough that like if you're not sure which hero you are, you can pick it up and then that's a reason to be Olympia. I think Double Down isn't quite on that level because like you need like the surrounding pieces for it, but it is really powerful. The other cute interaction with Double Down, Prize Galea will turn on the +3 from Double Down. So you can actually, with Prize Galea, if you play Double Down, you can react with Prize Galea and then you get the +3 and overpower retroactively. The overpower not so impactful because it's like during the reaction step and they've already chosen their blocks, but the +3 is pretty nice.
That's kind of gross.
Yeah.
Oh, I guess we didn't really talk about this, but what about the Kasai specializations? Does any of those make you want to go Kasai?
The hood is okay. I think the hood is like one of the weaker specializations. It's still good. Like Blade Break, Battle Warren 1, and then you can pay 1 to draw a card is like okay. I found the pay 1 to draw a card by banishing a red and a yellow being like surprisingly less good than it reads. Have you had that experience with that card?
Yeah, it's kind
like
of
okay.
hard because like if it has go again, like if a hood's on board and if the sword has go again, they're just so incentivized to block it, so they'll just block it.
Yeah, I also think it like costing 1 is like you plan your turn and you don't always have the flexibility for the extra resource. Banishing the red and the yellow eats into your like ability to activate the gold tokens. Like it's, I don't want to say it's bad, but it's just when I read it, I was like, wow, this card is amazing. And then I played with them, like this card is okay.
I think it might shine in some specific spots, but like I think on average, you're just gonna be like, this is a good Battle Worn 1 equipment that does an extra thing. some of the times and makes it annoying for your opponent. And I think that's good.
Yeah, I think it's good. I think it's probably like the best headpiece in the set for Kasai, but I think Prize Galea is like considerably more powerful, for example.
Yeah. And what about Raise the Army? Raise an Army is a Kasai specialization that sees a constructed player, right?
It is. I think so. I haven't gotten to play with this card, but my impressions of this card from seeing people play it and thinking about it is that this card is just like starting stake. Like it's just like a 0 for 3 non-attack that blocks 3 and is yellow. It's just so hard to get value out of. So it's 0 cost as an additional cost. You can destroy X gold and you make X Centauri sellsword tokens. The big problem is that while the Centauri sellswords are really powerful, so they're allies with 3 power, 2 life, and you can spend 1 resource once per turn to attack with them with Go Again. But the problem is Centauri sellswords can only attack if you've attacked with a weapon this turn. So you kind of like, that means you need an agility token and you need the resources to pitch into this and you need the golds to convert into this. Like kind of what I found with this card is like when I've seen people play it, it's like it needs to be second cycle so you get enough golds. You're then not using the golds just to like use Kasai's hero ability normally, which like kind of has a cost and costs you some value. And then like you need to be able to like still have the agility token for the sellswords to get value out of them, and you need the pitch for them. Like it's just like so much to get value out of this card that it doesn't really work. And when I've seen people play it, like sometimes they get like 1 sellsword turn and it's like that was kind of cool, and then they're like, I can't turn this on anymore. It doesn't really do anything. So I don't know, I'm not really a fan of this card. I think it's a starting stake, honestly.
You know how I view this card? It feels like a win more card.
Yeah,
Like you're already winning, and then now you want to like style on your opponent and you raise an army.
yeah. I don't think Raise an Army is a reason to be Kasai. In fact, I think it's like a very low pick. I think if you think of this card just like starting stake, you'll save yourself a lot of headache. Like value it the same way you would value that card. It's just a yellow 3 block.
Yo, it's great. It activates Kasai's banish
Mm-hmm.
ability.
Yeah. But like playing this card, like, you know what? I'm sure that there's like spots where this card has been good, like almost certainly, but like it's just so rare. It's so many hoops to jump through. Do not make this your game plan into Fatigue. I think there was like a game on coverage at one of the callings where somebody tried to do this, and they did get to raise an army for 2 and like swing twice, and then the Guardian just like blocked and was like, okay, block, like block 3 cards, hammer you, and then they're just like, yeah, I have 4 cards left in deck and I don't have agilities anymore. Like I can't, like these sellswords are just sitting here. So it's just like, I don't know, it's just too hard.
It's so funny.
Yeah, the Guardian just like blocks the 1 turn and is like, okay, can you turn them on again? And Kasai just like, no.
Yeah, so I guess that card is more of a constructed card than a limited card.
I think so. I'm sure that like somebody's gonna be like, no, I've had it and it did this amazing thing. I'm like, that's awesome, but it's a lot. It asks a lot of you.
So at the PT, you're not drafting Raise an Army for Kasai.
No, I mean, like, I would draft it. This is the card I draft and the card I put in my deck. But
yeah, yellow.
I'm drafting it as a yellow 3 block. Yeah.
Sounds good. Anything else you want to say about Warrior? I think we covered everything we wanted to say, honestly.
Yeah, no, I think that that pretty much covers everything. Warrior really strong. I think a lot of people like drafting Warrior in this set. I think overall, like all the classes in this set are pretty good. And biggest thing is just if you can be the 2 of, you want to be the 2 of, whether that's Warrior, Guardian, or Brute. I think you'll have a good deck if you can be the 2 of. Sometimes you can't though, and Warrior and Brute being the 3rd one can still be pretty okay. All right, I think that's gonna wrap us up then for this week. If you have any questions or you want to get in touch with us, you can do so on social media. I'm at Yukili Bender on Twitter. Jay is at UATaJ, also on Twitter, or you can email us directly on thebobble@gmail.com. Our Patreon is patreon.com/onthebobble. Thanks so much for listening, and good luck at your remaining RTNs. If you have any thoughts about things that we missed about Warrior, or other thoughts about the format, maybe don't agree with some of our takes, let us know in the comments down below. We'd love to hear your thoughts. But until next time, good luck and have a good night.
Okay, sign off. I guess for the sign off, do you want to do
Persona 3 Remake, real good. I never played the original Persona 3. I've been playing Persona 3 Remake. Game's pretty fun. If you like Persona games, would recommend checking it out. I'm still like, I don't know, first like third of the game, and it's real long, but yeah, I've been enjoying that game. The characters are pretty good. You have some good like, so it's an RPG. You have like some good, I don't know, turn-based RPG combat. You have some like school life social stuff that's fun to manage. I don't know, it's just like a pretty good chill game. It's like not a bad way to just like unwind at the end of the day. So if you like JRPGs and you're looking for something, maybe you could check that out.
Was P3 the one where you can like date the school teacher? Or is that P5?
I don't know. I haven't gotten the option to do that yet, so
Oh, okay. That's fair. That's fair. Yeah.
but there's a character that does try to date a school teacher, so I don't know, maybe that's what you're talking about. You have like a friend that, well, maybe this is spoilers, but you have a friend that like tries to date a school teacher, and it's kind of funny.
Yeah, I'm pretty sure in one of the Persona games, the meme was that you get to date a school teacher if you really wanted to.
Interesting. Yeah, because like the way it is like you're just like you're a kid at school that has like other stuff going on, but then you like live your daily school life, and then you get to like take tests and make friends and spend time with your friends and work part-time jobs, and yeah, you just got to do all this stuff. It's actually pretty fun. Like it sounds kind of silly, but it's like actually pretty fun. Each of the characters have like kind of like their own like mini story arc, and you gotta like see what's going on with them. And sometimes those stories are kind of weird, and sometimes they're kind of fun. And yeah, I don't know, I've been enjoying it. It's like real chill.
Yeah, Persona, a very popular game in Japan, so I've never played it, but I know a bunch of my friends really enjoy it, so meh. Honestly, try it out. Okay, yeah, I guess that's it.
Yeah.
All right, good night, everyone. Bye bye.
Good night. Bye now.